Dallas Turner has stacked a few nice games together in a row, but is he really the guy we thought he should be, or is it all a mirage? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcasting network. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. Today on the show, I've got a jam-packed show set up for you. We are going to discuss Dallas Turner in a little bit of depth. I have a Patreon video coming out about him at patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL. If you want to see some of the footage, some of the, see me show my work on that a little bit, but I'll give you the broad strokes here. I also think we should discuss what we want to see from J.J. McCarthy for the rest of the season, as the Vikings only have 5 games left to play. So we've got to kind of decide what we want to see from him with recalibrated expectations based on what we've seen so far. And in those 5 games, a lot of guys are going to be playing for jobs, whether they're jobs elsewhere or whether they're on, cuttable contracts or expiring contracts. They're sort of in auditions for themselves, and we'll discuss what those guys have at stake. But first, Dallas Turner. Look, I think the expectation for Dallas Turner has been extraordinarily unfair to Dallas Turner because of the circumstances of his trade. I've gone over it a million times, so I'm not going to rehash the argument, but just to catch us all up, when the Vikings traded up in March before the 2024 draft, they thought they were doing so for a quarterback. They trade from the second round up to the first round, and they end up taking that first rounder and trading it up again for Dallas Turner. All told, it looks like they've spent like 9 draft picks on the guy, but that never really was the intention of what they were doing. They were really spending 9 draft picks to try to ensure that they could get a quarterback, and they tried to package all that stuff to move up for somebody else, and they got rebuked, and it is what it is. But what that meant was that people thought that, this was going to have to, people are looking at this like it was a Ricky Williams trade, right? Like they traded an entire draft. That's not remotely true. That's not remotely what they did. They picked a guy 17th overall. So I've been sort of saying, look, he was a 17th overall pick. Let's see if he lives up to the 17th overall pick expectation, which to me is a guy that needs to be, a contributor right away and then hopefully develops into a positive starter for your team. And he's been on that track a little bit behind it. Nothing that I was really, if people weren't asking constantly and complaining constantly, nothing I really would have given too much concern to. Seemed like we're kind of on the track that you would expect for number 17 overall. And if number 17 overall is, finding his stride in year 2, then I think we can be pretty happy and we can say, yeah, they overpaid to get to that pick because they mishandled the quarterback market. But I think it's important that we're specific about which criticism we're levying there. I think they misunderstood the quarterback market quite a bit in 2024. And that's a criticism that I'll levy at Kwesi, but I don't think that needs to spill over into Dallas Turner. And I really don't think it means we need to expect Dallas Turner to be like Nick Bosa immediately for it to feel like it was worth the draft capital. I just don't think that's fair. So with that expectation laid out, obviously he was not living up to the 17th overall pick his rookie year. You do still want a little more than what we got. Especially in moments where he did get in the game a little bit more. But in the last part of last year, he started to kind of get a little bit more of a rhythm. And we're sort of seeing the same pattern here. He was a little bit of a no-show for kind of all of October, but now he is contributing quite a bit more. Dallas Turner has 6 sacks on the year, which leads the Vikings. There are 4 Vikings with 4 sacks. Dallas Turner has 4 in the last 3 games. He is now also just behind Grenard as the pressure leader on the Vikings. Grenard has 38. Dallas Turner has 31. Nobody else is over 30. He has, I think, kind of taken that mantle. Now, you want your 2 edge rushers that have played the most. Obviously, Van Ginkel's been hurt, but for whatever it's worth, Dallas Turner's actual pressure percentage is now above both Grenard and Van Ginkel and is only outdone by blitzers, which should be the case. Obviously when you're sending a cornerback off the edge, you're going to hope that guy gets pressure. He's got nobody to beat. So of linemen, Dallas Turner has been the best pass rusher on the Vikings. At least the most productive. So why is that happening? Okay. So I have covered Dallas Turner on my Patreon page, at least in a ton of detail. There's hours and hours and hours. You could fill a whole weekend with it if you wanted to go watch all of it. And the progression of those goes from, wow, this guy can't get motion on anybody. Basically, Dallas Turner's a speed to power guy, right? He explodes off the ball best he can, get 1, 2, 3 steps, turn it into a bull rush. Speed to bull is the way that Kevin O'Connell refers to it. And that's great. That's his fastball, but he didn't really have a finishing move. He would get in these really great leverage positions. He'd get his hands up and under the pads of the lineman. He would get under him. He would have, inside great hand placement. He would have every leverage advantage in the world. And last year, he just wasn't bulky enough for that to actually turn into progress. Guys could still just kind of anchor on him because he was just too much weaker than like NFL tackles. He just came out, hadn't bulked up enough, right? Well, he visibly bulked up a lot this year, and now that's working. That leverage advantage is actually giving him what you want it to give to him. But just walking a tackle back is often not enough. And we saw that quite a bit this year, especially earlier in the year when they were playing all those mobile quarterbacks. They had like Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson. Everybody's running around. Caleb Williams week 1 even. And even Justin Herbert. All those guys are able to escape because Dallas Turner is basically squeezing the pocket, reducing the room. There's an impact to that. That's nice. We like that, but it's insufficient when the quarterback can just move and make more room. You have to be able to finish. You have to be able to get off of that block at a certain point. You've moved the block to a great place. Now you have to get off of that block, escape, and that's where it starts to turn into production. You never had that finishing move. Well, one of the sacks that Dallas Turner had against Sam Darnold in Seattle, he had 2 strip sacks in that one. It was the first one where he finishes with a rip move and it works. I love it. Oh, I was so excited to see that. The second sack was nigh unblocked. It was a blitz package and Seattle didn't pick it up properly. And so I don't put nearly as much stock into the one that actually became a turnover. It was the one that the Seahawks recovered. That one means a lot to me. Now that's very rare for Turner so far, is to kind of get that leverage, get that tackle walk back, and then finish and make the play. But he has been finishing and making the play. Like I said, 4 sacks in the last 3 games is a fantastic clip. In fact, by pressure percentage, PFF's pressure percentage, Dallas Turner has been the 5th best edge rusher in the league by over the last 3 weeks. Up there with Khalil Mack, Micah Parsons, Cameron Jordan, and Myles Garrett. Pretty good company. He's playing great ball right now because it's finally coming together. And I always saw that it was close, right? That there was, 90% of the rep was there, but it wasn't finishing. It doesn't turn into production. And therefore, hey, football's an all or nothing game. You do 90% of the work, you do 0% of the work, you don't get any pressure either way, right? But you could tell that it was close and it's coming together. Here's my concern. There are too many reps still, even in that Seattle game where he played so well, where like Cooper Kupp walls him. I think there's still a sort of sand in his pants problem that the Vikings are just going to probably have to work around, but that's kind of comes with the territory of a guy that can like drop into coverage and drop to a 9-yard hook zone landmark like the Vikings often ask him to do. Bulk him up too much and you start to lose that. But there is something there that is starting to like coagulate, and we just kind of want to see it keep up, and maybe the production can, continue here. But to me, this is one of the major storylines of the last 5 games of the year. Because whether the Vikings win or lose that is going to pretty quickly become irrelevant. If they lose any of their upcoming games, that will be the game that eliminates them. Officially, mathematically, thank you, fans, right? So, like, that's not the storyline anymore. The storyline, one of the main ones to me is, does Dallas Turner keep it up, or is this a flash in the pan? I will point to the Patreon video for kind of the rest of that analysis, because I do want to discuss a little bit about JJ McCarthy and guys who are playing for their jobs. That'll all be next on Locked On Vikings. This episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Aura Frames. It is the holiday season, and that means it is gift-giving season. And Aura Frames can be the perfect solution for that one person you just never know what to buy for. You want something that's meaningful, that's personal, and that works exactly the way you intend it to. So if you're looking for a big smile on that special day, check out Aura Frames. It's not just something you wrap, it's a way to share memories. You can actually preload the frame with all the pictures that you want, which means that they open it right up and it just works. You plug it right in, the pictures are all there, big smiles, everybody's happy, no fussing, no trying to explain to your grandparents how to rotate a PDF, none of that. You can have endless uploads of pictures and 30-second videos even through the Aura app, and you can add a personalized message right inside the frame, so it feels thoughtful the moment that it's open. For a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off of Aura's best-selling Carver mat frames, named #1 by Wirecutter, by using promo code LOCKEDON at checkout. That's AURA frames.com, promo code LOCKEDON. This deal is exclusive to listeners and frames that sell out fast, so order yours now to get it in time for the holidays. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. Moving on with the Locked On Vikings podcast. Let's table the Dallas Turner talk for now. It's something I maybe will cover in a lot of detail over the next month or so, as we're looking for kind of something to chew on with these games that are otherwise functionally meaningless. But really, it's hard to have a meaningless game when you have a young quarterback, because how that quarterback shows steps is like a huge part of this, right? Like it or not, you're stuck with JJ McCarthy for a while. Even if the Vikings bring in another quarterback this offseason to compete with him or to start instead, McCarthy's under contract on a cheap rookie contract and is going to stay in the building, barring somebody offering a bunch of draft picks for him, which I think for the people who want him gone the most probably have a hard time envisioning another team saying, please take my draft picks, we want this guy so bad. So I think we can accept McCarthy's going to be here. And what he shows over the last 5 games, like he's played 6, he's got 5 to go. He's barely halfway through his season. And from an experience standpoint, I do want to share with you. So I just wrote an article out wide left about Bryce Young. It's not for Locked On Vikings, but an earlier draft of the article tried to make it about, like, you know, quarterbacks that struggled and then turned it around, and hey, this JJ McCarthy thing, and, you know, look at the difference in experience that he has, and can experience, you know, be different. What did this guy look like at his 1000th snap versus his 2000th snap? And so I was looking up like snap count data. I ended up nuking that whole part of the article, and I think it's right for the article, but I did gather something that kind of blew me away, which is that McCarthy has taken 800 some dropbacks as an adult. So between college and the pros, 800 some dropbacks. All 5 of the other first round quarterbacks in 2024 had more than that coming out of college. This is a remarkably inexperienced quarterback. The difference is kind of staggering. I mean, Jaden Daniels has like almost double it. And several of them have over 1,500 and had double the experience that McCarthy had coming out of college. And then, of course, because of injuries and stuff, he hasn't gained that much experience. But I look at like how Jaden Daniels looked around snap 1,000, around drop back 1,000. I think he was probably still at Arizona State by then and floundering. He wasn't great. And he kind of, like, part of the argument about Daniels in particular coming out was that he only had the one good year and that he had a bunch of struggling stuff at Arizona State. So there is this huge experience thing. And I think Kevin O'Connell understands and is maybe overrating how much that excuses. He definitely understands it, though. So I think the more I think about it, the more I feel as though the Vikings are not going to overreact to this. It would be kind of crazy to go for a quarterback with that much inexperience, watch it flame out, and then not let that quarterback get the experience everybody else has, and rather just go with something else. It would be a pretty astounding waste of resources. Not just the draft capital they spent on McCarthy himself, but the sort of reputational capital and the opportunities that they wasted. Kind of throwing their whole lot in behind the kid just to move off it right away. So I kind of don't think they're going to do it. And maybe that means that he physically could not be bad enough to make the Vikings move off of him, right? Which is maybe appropriate. Maybe you shouldn't ever look at his rookie year and ask, was this bad enough to move off of him? Maybe there shouldn't be a limit. And I don't know if there is. But what that means is that, over these last 5 games, I'm going to kind of reiterate I'm going to echo the same stuff that I was talking about before. I want to see signs of progress. I don't need to see him figure it out and have a 350-yard game with 4 touchdowns. Not going to happen. That's not the way that we're looking at this, right? But I just want to see one where it looks okay. In fact, just because I was looking at Bryce Young all week, which go to Wide Left, read the article. I'm very happy with it. But just looking at game by game, how his career really developed, he didn't really get one that was unambiguously a good performance until December of his second year. It was Christmas Eve. It was against the Packers. They didn't even win that game. It was close, but it was, Toyota-thon Jordan Love. It was 2023 Jordan Love, the same one that the very next week torched the Vikings in US Bank Stadium on New Year's, and then went and after that and beat the Dallas Cowboys 2-seeded, as the 7th seed. And it was this coming out party for Love. And Bryce Young, that big hype machine, Bryce Young went toe to toe with it. And everybody in Carolina finally was like, wait, maybe there's proof of concept here. That was game 25 for Bryce Young. Maybe even closer to game 30, right? And Carolina stuck by it. So I don't need to see that. I don't need to see J.J. McCarthy become Toyota-thon Jordan Love craziness. I just need to see some sign that they're finding progress. I want it to stop looking like it's going backwards. The Jordan Love we saw against the Lions and the Ravens, the J.J. McCarthy we saw against the Lions and the Ravens is a much better quarterback. Statistically, film-wise, everything. That is a much better performance than what we saw against the Bears, the Packers, and then, and not the Seahawks, of course, but I want to see that kind of backslide stop. And it's not like things were perfect against the Lions or the Ravens. I mean, the Ravens game, if I recall, was rife with inaccuracy, and he kind of lost his mind in that game a little bit, but that was actually statistically McCarthy's best game. And then, of course, the way he played against the Lions was much better. Was a winning effort, which helps quite a bit, but it was a lot cleaner too. So I want to get back to kind of finding that. And what that comes with, I think, needs to be partnered with different decisions from the coaching staff, especially as you don't feel super desperate. If the Vikings are mathematically eliminated this week because they lose to the Commanders, very possible. They're underdogs at FanDuel by 1.5 at home to a team that's shutting down veterans. It's real bleak, folks. But if McCarthy's team, if McCarthy's no longer tasked with trying to shoulder this comeback effort, run the table, make the playoffs, which is probably the mentality in the building right now. Well, let's just win 5 in a row, all right? And we'll go 9-8, and we'll see if we get the help. Once that pressure is off, right? The pressure of, a 14-3 team that's now turned to you and you have to do just as good and all that stuff. Well, now that ship has sailed. Season's over. Now it's just all preseason. Just play, dude. Just play. Maybe we can find something. But all I need to see, I want to, look at the tape and say, oh, look, his footwork's looking a little better. right, on this interception. Like, I don't need it to be a good play. I just need to see some part of it be redeemable. The bar is truly on the floor right now, and that's because the Vikings have taken a remarkably inexperienced young quarterback, asked him to play like a 10-year veteran PhD offense. The whole thing collapsed out from under them, and I think they've got to kind of find their feet again. And even if that means you just have to go to week 18 and it's going to be a meaningless game against the Green Bay Packers, who've already clinched their playoff spot and everybody's playing backups. Even if it takes all the way till that game, but oh, hey, look, McCarthy had a reasonable game in that week 18 when you can talk about it all offseason. I think that's what we're looking for. It is an absolutely dreadfully truncated expectation. Like, it is tragically lowered what I need to see from the Vikings, because I know I can't expect them to go be a competitive team for 5 games now. I can't expect them to be a team that goes toe-to-toe with the best teams in the NFC, or that, finds a way to make the division interesting. It's too late for that. They just got blanked, man. Like, this is the worst team you've seen in your life if you're under 40. But that doesn't mean that the season has to be a waste of time. It can still be developmentally valuable, and it can absolutely be valuable for some of the other players around McCarthy with their own careers to think about. So let's highlight some of those situations next on Locked On Vikings. This episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Like I mentioned, the Vikings are 1.5 underdogs at home against a Washington Commanders team that has very much thrown in the towel. We'll cross over about it tomorrow, but if you feel like this is the time when the Vikings break this hideous losing streak, then why don't you go bet it at FanDuel right now? You can get $300 in bonus bets if you're just now signing up, if you just go make a $5 bet, or you can wait until after the game starts. You can wait until halftime. And you can say, hey, I think the Vikings are going to make a comeback, or nope, they're not going to make a comeback. If you did that at halftime against the Seahawks and went, I don't think they're going to make more of a game out of this, you would have been right and you would have been able to win. And you got to just gather a bunch of information before you actually went in and made your bet. Live spreads and money lines adjust instantly, play by play, drive by drive, and on momentum flips, turnovers, whatever it is. So if you feel like somebody's heating up or cooling down, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Moving on with the Locked On Vikings podcast, there are a lot of players with a lot to lose in the next 5 games, even though the Vikings are out of playoff contention. And I know we're going to get into this conversation. I'm going to try to avoid it because I've had it a lot and I'm bored by it, but I'm never, ever, ever going to be the kind of guy that's like, ooh, I hope the Commanders win so I look a little better on Tankathon. I think that that's just kind of a loser's mentality. Those people moved on to the offseason months ago, and don't come crying to me when it's March and you're sick of it being the offseason already. I just will not ever want the Vikings to lose out of pure principle, even in the face of irrationality, because it is obviously strictly better to pick, 5th than it is to pick 10th. The value of that is measured on charts and stuff. Like, I get it. But I think the practical realities of the NFL, you've got a lot of people with jobs on the line. Probably everybody in the Vikings coaching staff needs the Vikings to look good, to show life, to stack wins, to show they can win a football game, to save their jobs, right? You can daydream about where the Vikings will pick if they're 4-13 all you want. Nobody in that building wants to end the season on a 9-game losing streak, because that means their careers end. They're not doing it. And the ownership doesn't want them to do it either. So it's not like some selfish thing that they're going to go rogue when everybody's actually like, oh, you're ruining your draft position. It's a fan's mentality. And I am a fan on this show, but I do try to think from the perspective of the people making decisions. I try to put myself in their shoes, and in their shoes, it's not going to happen. So who are those people? Well, like I said, the staff, right? Guys like Matt Daniels, who's been coaching for his job for a little bit now after some really high profile special teams gaffes in the middle of the season. But also, other staffers. I would say Mike Saravo. I would say Mike Pettin. I would say, Wes Phillips, Josh McCown. There are a lot of players whose position coaches, whose groups are struggling, are making mental mistakes, are caught out of position a lot, are disorganized substitutions, guys that don't know what they're supposed to do or where they're supposed to go. That all reflects really poorly on coaching. The Vikings are a big penalty team this year. They are, struggling on the play clock. The operation being disorganized is really, really tough on these guys. And what that means is, hey, you got 5 games to show me that you can do this. Otherwise, I do need to go get somebody else who's good at this job so that we're ready to go for 2026. This is now an audition for you, so you better do well. And they are not going to hold a single thing back because they're worried about what the Vikings draft position will be 4 months after they fired me. Nobody's doing that. But beyond the staff, I think about players like Jalen Nailor. He's in a contract here. I would say it is unlikely that the Vikings offer him something that he is satisfied with. I think Nailor has had a good enough year. He has shown enough, and I think especially when you flip on the tape, even though the production hasn't really been there, he's been open really consistently all year on deep routes. He has had a ton of explosive potential. So if I'm a team that wants to go deep all the time, I think about like Miami if they hang on to McDaniels, which is a big if. I think about like the Chiefs that could really use a deep threat. Those teams love these speedster type guys, and I think would bring that in somebody like Nailor to be a more clear-cut person in the offense instead of a rotational guy that, to be honest, is the 5th target on the team after, Jefferson, Addison, Hawkinson, and the running back. Then you're going to Nailor. Like, I think he can get a better role somewhere else, and I think he can get paid for that role in a way that the Vikings wouldn't be willing to match. But I hope the Vikings offer him something. But I certainly won't blame Jalen Nailor for trying to go hit the market and do better. But to do that, I think you do need to see some production in this last bit. So you have, everybody's got to have a good taste in their mouth going into the offseason, right? You can't just kind of say, hey, I had a total disappearing act in December, but I promise I was really open. It's a much harder sell than like, yeah, I was kind of open all year. And then, hey, that week 16 game where I popped off, that was when it finally, that's what I can be. That's it. They finally got me the ball the way they should have. That 100-yard game that he had a couple of weeks ago, I think is a huge one for him. And if he can put up another one, I think he makes himself a ton of money. I don't think it's here, but it sure is going to matter to Jalen Nailor. Here's another one I think is interesting. It depends on how injuries shake out. But I think Michael Juergens is playing for his job a little bit. He might not get a chance to, depending on Ryan Kelly's availability. He's got a hip flexor thing. I don't know where he is at on the injury report as of this recording. But I think if Michael Juergens goes in, he gets a chance to kind of right more of the wrongs. I didn't take too close of a look yet at how he did in Seattle when he came in, as Ryan Kelly went out and Blake Brandel was stuck playing guard. So for Donovan Jackson. So depending on how injuries shake out, if Donovan Jackson is still hurt and Ryan Kelly is still hurt and Juergens plays center again, he might be able to re-cement his hold on that backup job. He lost that job because of one bad half in Dublin. And it was a really bad half. He was like messing up really basic run ID stuff and, making mental mistakes that basically made the team lose any and all trust in him, which is wild because they trusted him as the primary backup center for 2 years straight. And he goes in for one half for Ryan Kelly and it's out, even though he had a decent game the week before against Cincinnati. One bad half and it was over. And all trust was lost. All goodwill had been undone. So he's kind of back to square one, and a good showing for him could mean everything. Not to mention J.J. McCarthy. I don't think we're past the world where McCarthy has to beat a guy in camp next year. And in fact, I think he really should have to beat a guy in camp. I think part of the issue that kind of led us to this point is the fact that McCarthy didn't have to beat anybody, didn't have to compete with anybody. It would have been reasonable to make him compete with people. I even said that in February. I was like, yeah, they'll probably bring in somebody for competition. And maybe that competition was going to be Daniel Jones. That was kind of one scenario that I thought was really plausible, but they didn't do any of that. They let him take all the first team reps completely. They prioritized, give you first team reps, develop you and all that. and tried to get more out of camp that way. But there was no failsafe for if he wasn't ready to do what the Vikings were going to ask him to do. And I think part of it too is because they kept camp so simple as to not reveal all the tricky dicky nonsense that they were planning to do all year. They didn't practice that enough, and they didn't really get a good enough look at how much McCarthy was going to struggle with some of that physical quarterbacking stuff and how much it speeds up your read. And not to mention just the general struggles in regular quarterback plays that have kind of cropped up too. They didn't get their chance to identify that because they didn't have any semi-serious competition to hold them up to. They cut everybody but Max Brosmer, who just played the worst game you've ever seen. That was the only other guy in the room that they even wanted to keep on the team. So maybe next year they might say, hey, let's have a serious option that we can turn to if this guy's a total mess. Or if McCarthy can pull it together, play a little better, they'll still bring in somebody who's more serious than Brosmer to be a backup, but the standard is different, right? That means, okay, we're bringing in a guy that can play 2 games and be okay, not a guy that we can turn to for the season if this goes belly up, right? You're not necessarily looking for your Jacoby Brissett. We're going to turn to you and make this your team now. You're not looking for your next Sam Darnold. You're looking for your next Carson Wentz that can just kind of come in and play a vanilla offense and hope that you go 2-3 during his 5 games. There's a lot of situations like that. You know, I mentioned a bunch on the offense, but you got guys like Eric Wilson who could earn a lot of time, or who could earn a little extra time here. You've got guys like Jalen Redmond, who just kind of, if he can keep up what he's been doing, I don't think he needs to show you anymore. He just needs to not fall off. And I think he could make a lot of money soon. Not to mention guys like Dallas Turner, Van Ginkel, and Jonathan Grenard, who are all jockeying with each other for playing time, even though they're all under contract. All of that is going to kind of factor into momentum going into the preseason and camp and position battle times and contract stuff all throughout the summer and offseason. So there's a lot to watch for the rest of this Vikings season, despite the fact that you're not watching for playoff positioning. We just kind of have to go back to the mode that we were in like July, where we're viewing this a little bit more as an individual competition rather than trying to watch the scoreboard. Like it or not, we are playing the Commanders this weekend, and that means there's a crossover. So I'm going to talk to David Harrison tomorrow with Locked On Commanders. We'll do a crossover. We'll see just how bad things are over there compared to how bad things are here. Should be an interesting one. I'll talk to you all then, and as always, Skull.